So I was watching a video the other day by Keith Woods called Meaning and Modernity. And I like the video. I don't want this to come off as a critique of Keith Woods or what he says. I actually, when it comes to the consumer culture stuff and the anti-capitalist stuff, I do agree with a lot of what he and Richard Spencer say, although I do kind of question the efficiency of the critiques themselves. Again, they're not wrong, but these are sort of like critiques that I remember people making, like liberals making 10 years ago. Maybe not exactly the same criticisms, but we used to talk about like planned obsolescence and automation and these things that really impacted people's ability to make a living. Now, Keith makes a very good argument from a materialist standpoint about people losing their jobs and losing their ability to find meaning, as he says. But meaning to me implies utility, like, and this is a big part of male identity, of course, the finding meaning in yourself and finding a way to provide for your community, your family, your friends, etc., your nation. And this is a big part of identity. It's not just about like being useful. It's about looking in the mirror and seeing who you are. Like when a white liberal looks in the mirror, what does he see? He sees a colonizer, an oppressor, a bad person because of what his ideology tells him. But when a mechanic looks in the mirror, he doesn't just see some fat, bearded, greasy guy. He sees a hardworking, blue-collar family man. That's what he wants to see, and that is a big part of what defined a lot of blue-collar Americans decades ago, and what defines a lot of them now. But of course, when you look at the trends in job markets, the outsourcing to places like China, and now to India, what you see is that more and more our workforce becomes based around distribution and fast food and these sorts of things. So it's more people working in department stores and restaurants and such. And these are jobs that are very difficult to find an identity in for many reasons. One reason I would say, like when you're talking about particularly mining or some sort of manual labor, there's often a result that you can look to show your progress. Like if you're cutting down acres of trees, you can look over the acres of trees that you've cleared and see your progress. You can see the fruit of your labor. If you're stocking shelves at Walmart, you put the cans in the hole and then you come back the next night and the hole is empty again. Like you're not getting anywhere. You're just going through the motions. And it's hard for someone to look in the mirror and say, I'm a 50-year-old McDonald's burger flipper and that's like my identity. Like you don't want to derive an identity from that, which is very hard on people because this is a big part of your life. This is a big part of how you spend your time. And when you look at this, I would say, from a materialist standpoint, it's very good to make this argument that the loss of jobs is going to weigh heavy on people. Keith Woods brings up the suicide rate. The suicide rate's gone up. Well, it's gone up every year, I think, for several years now. But I would actually argue it would have been higher if we still had those industries, because now that you have more people doing these dead-end jobs, right? More of these people that don't have an identity based on work, based on labor, they're just doing it for money. They just want money. And so a lot of these people are perfectly happy to stay home and do nothing because they don't have a sense of identity from this. And you can look at this generationally too. From like the young baby boomers down to the millennials, excuse me, just lighting a cigarette. From the young baby boomers down to the millennials, a lot of these people, like, they just want to work to retirement age and then retire. But I remember when I was a kid, and even sometimes now, I notice a lot of people in their like 80s and 90s, these like silent generation types, they would work well past retirement age. And these are the people that lived the longest. These were guys like 85 years old working in the woods. These are the guys that dropped dead in their 90s from a heart attack, but they work till the day they die, right? And that's very much, I think, a generational thing. But it's good for you because when you retire, you lose the occupation, but you lose your identity. There's a lot of older people that go through an identity crisis when they retire because they don't know who they are anymore. They don't get that fulfillment from being a jeweler or whatever they are, and just doing the work. It's not even a matter of money. And that's why a lot of people, end up going back to work in the form of Walmart greeters. But I know a lot of like old people that have done that too, and they even say like it's not the same. You can't get the same level of fulfillment out of being a Walmart greeter that you could in your profession, right? So That proves my point right there. So what I would say is like this is a form of spiritual poverty. It's a form of identity crisis. Excuse me. This is a form of identity crisis, and so these people, if they were working in jobs where they had this, they would it would be something to lose, right? It would be something you would lose because of the pandemic, but because they didn't have it to begin with, they don't have to worry about it. It's sort of like how like you and I, you listening to this, you and I wouldn't be able to like understand what it would be like living in Zimbabwe or Uganda or something, right? It's very hard to fathom how these people live and how they can bear to live in such poverty. But if that's all you're raised in, if that's all you know, it's something you just adapt to, and so it's just part of your life. Like you don't question it. And I think for a lot of young people living in the West today, that's sort of the position that we're in, that we don't question what it is to like if these industries were to come back, think about this. It's not just that they don't want you to have jobs because they want to sell your industries to other countries, but if you were to get back some of that, you get back some of that identity, and you get back some of that like feeling like you've been missing something. Like you start to realize that this the labor force is something to derive a sense of self from. That could rejuvenate the white man spirit, so to speak. They don't want that, so that's a big part of this as well. So because we're living in this sort of spiritual poverty, this manifests in a lot of ways, and one of them is I keep seeing these posts on Facebook, and I used to see them on Twitter before I was banned recently. These posts of people saying things like, "Wow, this epidemic has been going on for months, and my life hasn't changed. My life hasn't been affected at all. Like I don't talk to people anyway. I don't go anywhere. I just worked, and now I get to stay home. I get to stay home and do what I wanted to do anyway, which is whatever, watch YouTube videos or play on my phone or whatever." So that's it really isn't a crisis for a lot of people. For some people it is, sure. I don't deny that. But for a lot of people it isn't. And that's because our society has been so deracinated and so hollowed out. And so I think that's an important part to mention too. And I think that we shouldn't just restrict ourselves to the sort of materialist arguments against capitalism, but also focus more on the soul crushing nature, because that's something that leftists don't ever talk about, right? They don't ever talk about the spiritual side of it because they are largely spiritually bankrupt. Any attempts at spirituality they make are usually like synthetic, like Sam Harris's meditation or whatever. It's not real. Um, And also, these arguments, not necessarily Keith Woods's or Spencer's arguments, but these arguments in general against consumer culture in general, like that's never really caught a lot of flack. You'll notice, like you can make those arguments and people don't really question it. The only people that really argue it are like libertarian types, the free markets that are like, oh God, what do we do without capitalism? Everything would fall apart. Oh God, this type of fucking idiots. Like those are the only people that really give you any blowback. You'll actually find a lot of people agreeing with you, if you make sort of the general arguments against capitalism in that way. But yeah, it's sort of like when you make an argument against the banks in general, the bankers, but you don't say who the bankers are, right? You're allowed to do that. And if you're allowed to do something, as we say, if you're not catching flack, you're not over the target. So I do sort of question the strategic aspect of making these arguments, but I don't disagree with them. And, again, this is not meant to be a criticism. I like Keith Woods, and I like that video too. But I just wanted to remark on a couple of things that I thought he missed. So thank you if you listened to the end of this video, and have a good night.